Hi, it's Mike Stevenson. This video is a follow-up to the Introduction to Resource Map video that I did recently, which had to be quite a quick video for the Integrate Summit, but in that video I showed how resources would be allocated using rules, so we could define some rules that when a resource was imported it would automatically be assigned to a scope, a logical resource and an environment. But there may be cases where you don't have resources that are set up in Azure in a way that makes it easy to do that auto allocation. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to show how you can manually bring the resources in, assign them yourself, and sort of set your resource map up. So here we've got in the tree view for resource map, I've got Acme, and down in their subsidiaries they've acquired Contoso. In the integration area for Contoso, they've got some interfaces and they've got common invoices and vendor sync. And what we're going to do is we're going to look to bring some resources in from Azure and allocate them in these areas. So over in my resource group here, I've got a resource group called RM Demo 1, and I've got a whole bunch of logic apps in here that make up these resources we'd like to import. You'll notice with the names of the resources, I've got dev, test, prod on the end of them. That helps me know which environment they relate to, but it could also be the case that these resources may live in different resource groups, they may live in different subscriptions, they could even potentially live in different tenants. It really just utilizes the service principle that you've set up for resource map to use. So over in Serverless360, the next thing to do is to go to the resource section, and I've already imported these resources so they'll show up as unmapped resources. Now what you can do is if you set the auto sync to be on, it'll actually bring resources in every night if new things get added, and they'll be there waiting to be allocated, so you would know if new resources entered your estate, and you know you would have to do something with them to set them up and that kind of thing. So what I'm going to do here is I've got a bunch of resources, so I'm going to set my common ones up, and I'm going to choose those and map them to the common scope. Next I'm going to go for the invoices one. And I'll map those to the invoices scope. And finally I've got the vendor ones. And I'll map those to the vendor sync scope. Actually, I think there's quite a few logic apps for vendor sync, so I could have increased the number of items per page if I'd needed to there. So they'll go to vendor sync. Now if we go back to our scopes, so you can see the tree view's updated now, and I know that in these areas under Contoso's integration area, these have now got resources allocated to those scopes, but they haven't been mapped to either a logical resource or an environment. So they're shown as red because that tells me on the tree that I need to do something to get the map up to date. So let's go and have a look at the common area, and over here we've got a bunch of resources that have been added. I can see what they are, what they're mapped to, and what I'm going to do is begin with doing the allocation. So if I copy the name, I'm going to go and create a logical resource. It's I've taken the environment off the name. I've only got logic apps in this scope, so that by default it'll only show the types you've got in your scope, but you can add all resource types if you want to add stuff and preset things up before resources get allocated. And I've also got this SQL helper one. Now the next thing I need to do is start allocating the resource for each environment. So if I go and now choose that for the regex helper, this one here at the top is the dev environment. The next one is that one for the prod environment, and then the one here is for the test environment. Likewise, if I do the same for the SQL helper, so we've got dev, prod, and test. And you can see my scope over on the left hand side here has now gone green because common everything's fully mapped, it's all up to date, and everything's looking quite good. And you can see over here I've now got resources, logical resource and environments assigned for all of these. Now what I can do is I can also assign the resources on this page as well, so I can go and choose one and I'll be to change and update it, and I can assign them from here. It's really just what way you prefer to do it. You can also create a logical resource from this page as well, so it's really whatever way you find most comfortable. What's quite handy as well, so now I've got my resources mapped, one of the things that I can do is I can click on a resource, the logical resource name, and it'll let me actually see these resources side by side, so I can see which resource group they're in, if they're different, what kind, type, location, etc. And this gives you like a good high level comparison of those resources that might be difficult to see when they're not side by side. So that's one of the benefits of being able to put your resources in this cross tab view, where you can see the ones assigned by environment and kind of put them side by side. Now, I mentioned previously you can start doing cost analysis in here. You can define rules in this section. I've just created these resources so there won't be any costs to look at for them at the moment, but other things you might find interesting. So here I've got environments that I inherited from the parent scope. So actually these dev, test and prod have inherited right down as we build the tree out from Acme. But what I might do is, one example would be if I created a child scope, I might, under common, I might have some other section where I don't have dev, test and prod, I only have dev and prod. So what I can do is I can stop the inheritance on that child, and then I can modify the environment so that they don't kind of stay the same as everything above that. So that that inheritance is almost like a cascading of changes back like down the tree, which lets you kind of modify how different parts of your organization might have more or less test environments than the other, and the resource map can handle that. So hopefully that's a good example of how you can begin setting your map up. When you're doing it by hand like this is most likely going to be where you're working with a company who they may have quite a lot of resources already and they haven't set them up in a way that makes it easy to work out how to allocate them automatically. So one thing you might do, you might find some companies can easily allocate them based on tags. We're going to be adding more advanced rules for things like regexes and stuff like that based on resource names and resource groups and that kind of thing. But if the rules don't support the mapping that you need, you can always just bulk select them, map them by hand to the scope, and then set them up as you need to. So what you would find, I think, in practice is that you'll probably have somebody who's the overall owner for Azure who'll manage this section where the resources are coming in and being allocated to a scope. So for example, if I'm the owner of the entire Azure estate, I might see a resource and go, oh no, that's an integration resource, and what I'll do is I'll assign it to the integration scope. So maybe here I've said that belongs to Contoso integration, and then in here, so let's show an example of that actually. In here I could maybe take this resource, and you can see we've got the remap option and the unmap option. So unmap would let me take it out of the scope and it would go back to the root, which would let the overall Azure manager use it. But with remap, what I might do is if the integration manager said actually this doesn't, that this belongs to a child or to another scope within my area, I might change where in the tree the resource lives. So I think the overall Azure owner would set things to integration, and then the integration manager might decide which interface it belongs to or something like that. So you can remove the resources within your map to different scopes. Hopefully that's a good demo of how to use how to set your resource map up by hand. Thanks for listening.